How Hollywood Lied to You. Engagement Trap. Visual. A dim, ancient Japanese scroll slowly unfurls on screen to the deep, haunting sounds of a shakuhachi flute and war taiko drums. Suddenly, the screen transitions to slick, high-budget Hollywood clips of a black-clad assassin scaling a castle wall and throwing shuriken. A massive, loud, red X stamps across the screen with a jarring sound effect. I have a confession to make. Whenever I watch anime like Naruto or massive Hollywood blockbusters, I get this incredibly badass fantasy. You know the one. It's a pitch-black night, you're clad in skin-tight black gear, your belt is loaded with throwing stars and smoke bombs. With a straight-bladed ninja sword strapped to your back, you effortlessly scale a sheer castle wall, slide open a paper door, and assassinate a ruthless warlord in the blink of an eye. If you've ever had that exact same epic fantasy, drop a 1 in the comments right now. If you've always thought it was total nonsense, drop a 2. But today, as a fellow history nerd who has spent countless sleepless nights digging through dusty Japanese archives, I have to pour ice-cold water over that dream. Every single one of us has been utterly lied to by pop culture for nearly a century. If the real shadow operatives of history saw today's black ninja jumpsuits, they would roll over in their graves. Because back in the year 1580, if an assassin actually dressed like that, they wouldn't even make it past the outer courtyard before being turned into a human pincushion by patrolling guards. In reality, the lethal intruder was likely wearing the simple, unassuming robes of a traveling doctor, or perhaps standing right next to the castle guards, laughing and sharing a hot bowl of tea. They didn't carry flashing throwing stars, they carried bags of dyed rice. They couldn't turn invisible, but they used cold psychology and ruthless espionage to quietly rewrite the fate of an entire nation. Today's video is going to completely shatter everything you think you know about the ninja. This is an epic, gritty saga of bloody purges, mountain democracies, the terrifying Tokugawa secret police state, and a tragic final stand against the unstoppable machine of modern industrial warfare. If you're new here, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe, and bookmark this video. Trust me, every single minute of the next half hour is packed with so much hidden history you won't want to miss a second. Are you ready? Let's zoom out our historical lens and travel back to the blood and fire of Sengoku period Japan. Chapter 1. The Mountain Democracy and the Mercenary Economy. Visual. A dynamic 3D topographical map zooms in on the main island of Honshu, focusing near the ancient capital of Kyoto. The camera plunges into 2 basins completely choked by the rugged vertical peaks of the Suzuka and Kasagi mountain ranges, Iga and Koka.
The visual vibe is oppressive, isolated, and militarily impregnable. To understand the people we call the Shinobi, written with the kanji for endurance and secrecy, we first have to understand the brutal soil they grew from. The time is the mid-15th century. Japan is in a state of total, agonizing collapse following the devastating Onin War. The emperor is a mere puppet, and the authority of the ruling Ashikaga shogunate has crumbled into dust. Feudal warlords, known as daimyo, are hacking each other to pieces for land. The rule of law is brutally simple. Might makes right. But right next to the capital of Kyoto, there were 2 bizarre anomalies, the districts of Iga and Koka. If you flew over them in a plane today, you'd see the ultimate medieval bandit hideout. Surrounded by sheer vertical mountains and choked with dense forests, these regions were a nightmare for traditional samurai cavalry. While the rest of Japan was bowing to feudal dictators, Iga and Koka developed a wildly progressive political system called kuni-iki, essentially a self-governing mountain democracy. There were no supreme warlords here. Instead, dozens of local samurai clans formed a grand council, voting on major decisions like a medieval senate. To the dictatorial warlords of Japan, this primitive democracy wasn't just weird, it was an absolute abomination. But to survive surrounded by starving wolves, geography wasn't enough. Iga and Koka were overpopulated, and the mountainous soil was terrible for farming rice. So they engineered a unique, hyper-lethal export industry. They turned their entire population into elite mercenary cells specializing in asymmetric warfare and espionage. When traditional daimyo fought, they lined up their armies, shouted their family lineages, and charged into honorable combat. The warriors of Iga and Koka didn't care about your honor. Raised in the brutal mountain forests, they mastered the arts of long-range night raids, psychological warfare, spreading disinformation, deep cover camouflage, and targeted assassinations. This skill set, known as ninjutsu or shinobi jitsu, wasn't magic. It was a cold, hard, hyper-practical manual for medieval special forces survival. Here is the first massive historical myth we need to bust. Back then, the word ninja didn't even exist. They were called shinobi no mono, people of stealth, and most of the time they were just elite land-owning samurai who specialized in dirty work. According to the Bansen Shukai, the ultimate ninja manual written in 1676, a real shinobi on a mission rarely carried weapons. Instead, their belt was packed with 6 essential items, known as the shinobi rokugu. Amigasa, straw hat, a wide hat to hide their face, with hidden slots in the rim to conceal documents. Kaginawa, grappling hook, for climbing walls or tying up prisoners. Seki pitzel, slate pencil, for scratching coded messages on walls. Kusuri, medicine, for treating wounds, curing illnesses, or brewing lethal poisons. Sanjaku tenugui, a 3-foot cloth, a multi-purpose cloth used to filter drinking water, bandage deep gashes, or act as a makeshift face mask. Tsukegi, sulfur strips, chemical fire starters to commit quick arson. Notice there are no throwing stars or blowguns. So how did they transmit high-level intelligence?
They carried a pouch of 5-color rice, goshikimai. By scattering specific combinations of red, blue, yellow, black, and purple rice grains along a mountain path, they created a medieval binary code. A fellow agent passing by could instantly read whether the path meant ambush ahead or target eliminated. This psychological encryption is infinitely cooler than anything Hollywood ever rendered. Because they were hyper-efficient and took their secrets to the grave, Iga and Koka became the most lucrative mercenaries in the country. By playing rival warlords against each other, they kept the fires of war burning in everyone else's backyards while their hidden mountain democracy grew wealthy. But this fragile balance of power was about to be utterly crushed by a man known as the Demon King of the Sixth Heaven. Chapter 2. The Demon King Strikes. The Bloody Purge of Iga. That man was Oda Nobunaga, the brutal visionary who set out to unify Japan through sheer, unadulterated force. Nobunaga was an absolute pragmatist. He hated 2 things above all else: armed religious sects and self-governing democracies that refused to bow to a central dictator. To him, Iga and Koka were an intolerable disease festering right next to his capital. After seizing Kyoto and kicking out the last shogun, Nobunaga turned his terrifying gaze toward the mountains. And here, history gives us a beautiful piece of dark irony. In 1579, Oda Nobunaga's arrogant second son, Oda Nobuo, decided he wanted to impress his terrifying father. Without telling Nobunaga, Nobuo gathered over 10,000 elite samurai and launched a surprise invasion of Iga. This is known as the First Tensho Iga War. Nobuo assumed his massive army would steamroll a bunch of mountain peasants. Instead, he marched his men straight into a meat grinder. The moment the massive Oda army entered the narrow, choked mountain passes of Iga, they became blind targets. The Iga shinobi, disguised as humble merchants and wandering monks weeks prior, knew Nobuo's marching routes, camp locations, and even what color armor he wore each day. On a night when the heavens opened up with a torrential downpour, the Iga clans unleashed a masterclass in guerrilla warfare. They used the terrain to chop the massive Oda army into isolated pockets. From the pitch-black woods came a rain of arrows and hooked spears. The Iga warriors even utilized hollowed-out bamboo tubes packed with gunpowder, primitive landmines, and flashbangs. The sudden explosions and thick smoke panicked the Oda samurai horses, causing them to trample their own infantry in the dark. It was a total, humiliating routing. Nobuo's top generals were slaughtered, and he fled back across the border with a handful of broken men, completely shaming the Oda name. When Oda Nobunaga read the battle reports, he went into a demonic rage.
He sent his son a letter so terrifying it basically said, "You have brought pathetic disgrace upon our family. If you ever pull a stunt like this again, I will personally force you to disembowel yourself." Guys, knowing Oda Nobunaga's legendary unforgiving temper, how do you think he planned his revenge? If you think he sent an even bigger army to crush them openly, type "total war" in the comments. If you think he used ninja tricks against them, type "sneaky." Let me see your guesses below. Nobunaga didn't do sneaky. He did overwhelming, apocalyptic violence. 2 years later, in 1581, Oda Nobunaga personally took command. He didn't bother with clever strategies anymore. He mobilized an apocalyptic force of over 40,000 battle-hardened troops, invading Iga from 6 different directions simultaneously. The ratio of Oda soldiers to the local Iga population was staggering. Nobunaga's orders to his men were chillingly simple: leave nothing alive. This was the horrific Second Tensho Iga War. Outnumbered 40-1, the Shinobi of Iga put up a final, legendary resistance. They abandoned the lowlands and retreated into their fortified mountain castles, like Kashiwabara Castle, commanded by the high-ranking leader Momochi Sandayu. During this desperate siege, historical records document the jaw-dropping extent of real-world ninja tactics. To fabricate the illusion of massive reinforcements, the Iga warriors tied thousands of burning torches to tree branches and the horns of mountain goats, marching them across the ridges at night, successfully terrifying Oda's vanguard into a retreat. They used their supernatural stealth to slip into Oda's main camps at midnight, systematically assassinating the logistics officers and burning entire storehouses of food to the ground. According to the historical chronicle Iranki, 3 elite Iga marksmen armed with high-caliber matchlock rifles hid themselves in a pile of boulders along a path Oda Nobunaga was scouting. When Nobunaga's lavish palanquin passed by, all 3 fired simultaneously. The heavy lead bullets zipped inches past Nobunaga's helmet, obliterating the skulls of his personal bodyguards. But against an industrialized, inexhaustible war machine, tactics could only buy time. Nobunaga employed a medieval scorched-earth policy, using heavy artillery and rows of matchlock infantry. Villages were burned to ash, ancient temples were leveled, and thousands of innocent civilians and warriors were slaughtered indiscriminately. Starving and out of ammunition, Kashiwabara Castle finally surrendered. The proud mountain democracy of Iga was systematically wiped from the face of the earth. Yet the most beautiful thing about history is its sudden twists. Nobunaga thought he had exterminated the Iga threat. He had no idea that just 1 year later, the desperate survivors of that very bloodbath would play a critical role in tearing his empire apart. 1500 to 2100, Chapter 3, History on a Knife's Edge, The Great Escape of Tokugawa Ieyasu. Visual, the screen shifts to June 21, 1582. The ancient temple of Honnoji in Kyoto is engulfed in roaring cinematic flames. Oda Nobunaga is shown committing seppuku amidst the inferno after being betrayed by his general, Akechi Mitsuhide. Audio, the roar of fire, chaotic screaming, and the crash of collapsing timber. In 1582, the Honnoji incident shocked the nation.
The Demon King Oda Nobunaga was dead, betrayed by his own man, Akechi Mitsuhide. While the news shattered the country, there was one man whose situation was far more terrifying than Nobunaga's death. That man was Tokugawa Ieyasu, the future founder of the legendary Tokugawa shogunate. At that exact moment, Ieyasu was traveling through the nearby city of Sakai with a tiny entourage of just over 30 personal bodyguards. Following the coup, Akechi Mitsuhide's rogue army immediately deployed thousands of troops to hunt down and execute Ieyasu to prevent any retaliation. Making things worse, local peasants and bandits formed ruthless hunting parties called Nobushigari, specifically ambushing stranded samurai to strip them of their expensive armor and collect bounties. Tokugawa Ieyasu was trapped in a literal death zone. Ahead lay Mitsuhide's cavalry, behind lay bloodthirsty mobs. At this moment of absolute despair, one man stepped forward from Ieyasu's retinue. This was a warrior whose name would become an immortal legend in every video game and martial arts movie centuries later, Hattori Hanzo. Engagement prompt. Here comes another massive history myth. Do you guys think Hattori Hanzo was a masked assassin who threw smoke bombs and jumped across roofs? If you think he was a mystical ninja god, type myth in the comments. If you think he was a regular guy, type real. The real Hattori Hanzo was absolutely not a ninja. He was a high-ranking, heavily armored samurai general in the Tokugawa army, famous for his brutal spear fighting skills, which earned him the nickname Devil Hanzo. However, he possessed a highly unique background. His father was originally from Iga, meaning Hanzo still held immense respect and deep connections among the hidden remnants of the Iga clans. Furthermore, when Oda Nobunaga was busy butchering Iga 2 years prior, Tokugawa Ieyasu had secretly used his own territories to shelter and save hundreds of fleeing Iga and Koka refugees. To these mountain warriors, Ieyasu wasn't an oppressive warlord, he was the savior who kept their bloodlines alive. Hattori Hanzo looked at the desperate Ieyasu and said, "My lord, the main roads are a death trap. Our only hope of survival is to cut straight through the deadly mountains of Iga, reach the coast, and sail back to our home province of Mikawa." Marching through the freshly traumatized hostile ruins of Iga, it sounded like jumping out of the frying pan and into the fire. But Ieyasu had no choice. This treacherous journey would go down in history as Shogun Ieyasu's Iga Crossing, Shingun Iga Goe. On that perilous trek, the mountain clans showed where their true loyalties lay. Upon hearing the news, the Koka clan leader Yamanaka Nagatoshi immediately mobilized hundreds of hidden Koka warriors to secure the ridges. The Iga survivors used their flawless knowledge of every hidden cave and ravine to smuggle Ieyasu through the wilderness, disguising the powerful warlord as a humble, mud-caked peasant farmer. In this race against time, real Special Forces operations took center stage. Hattori Hanzo didn't use any magic ninjutsu, he used expert human intelligence, political promises, and massive boxes of gold coins.
Along the route, Iga scouts quietly neutralized bandit outposts ahead of the party and brushed away the hoofprints of Ieyasu's horses behind them. After 3 days of nerve-wracking, heart-pounding stealth, Tokugawa Ieyasu stepped onto the shores of the Ise stable, boarding a ship back to safety. Those 3 days altered the next 250 years of world history. If the Iga clans had decided to sell Ieyasu out to the highest bidder, the Tokugawa shogunate would have never existed. As a reward for saving his life, when Tokugawa Ieyasu officially unified Japan 20 years later and became shogun, he made a historic decree. He moved the surviving Iga and Koka clans straight into the heart of his new capital, Edo, modern-day Tokyo. The once hunted mercenaries of the mountains had entered the absolute epicenter of imperial power. But this promotion meant they were about to undergo a chilling transformation. Safely ensconced behind the massive stone walls of Edo Castle, these war-weary shadow warriors could finally take a deep breath and wipe the blood from their blades. And for those of you watching right now who are planning your very own historical pilgrimage to Japan to explore the real ruins of Kashiwabara Castle or the Iga Ninja Museum, there is a modern travel tool you absolutely need in your digital belt. Meet today's official video partner, the global eSIM service app built by the cybersecurity wizards behind NordVPN, Saily. As a history creator, whenever I travel overseas for field research, international roaming is an absolute nightmare. I used to waste hours at airport kiosks hunting for physical SIM cards, fumbling around with SIM ejector pins, and constantly worrying about losing my original home card. Saily completely vaporizes that headache. It offers affordable data plans for over 200 destinations worldwide. All you have to do is download the Saily app before you head out, choose the data plan that matches your itinerary, and enter our exclusive code, NIGHTSHIFT, at checkout to get a 15% discount on your very first package. The moment your plane touches down in Tokyo or Osaka, your eSIM automatically activates, and you are instantly connected to high-speed internet. It's as smooth and undetected as Hattori Hanzo's mountain route. Even better, Saily features an integrated ad blocker that wipes out annoying pop-ups, which actively saves your precious mobile data while you're out navigating ancient castle towns. Whether you're tracking down the remnants of Hannoji and Kyoto or exploring the imperial grounds of Tokyo, Saily ensures you're never disconnected. Click the link in the pinned comment or description below, download Saily, and use code NIGHTSHIFT. Now, let's step back inside the dark corridors of Edo Castle and witness how these legendary warriors evolved into something genuinely terrifying during times of peace.
Chapter 4. The Castle Detectives of the Tokugawa Surveillance State. The imagery shifts from chaotic, muddy Django battlefield scenes to the pristine, orderly, and highly disciplined world of the Edo period. The towering Edo Castle Tenshugaka looms large, symbolizing absolute totalitarian control. Woodblock prints show samurai patrolling clean streets with sharp, watchful eyes. In the year 1603, the Tokugawa shogunate was officially established. The 2 centuries of agonizing civil war were over, and Japan entered an era obsessed with one single thing: absolute stability and total surveillance. This raised a fascinating, highly practical dilemma. Now that the country was at peace and massive military campaigns were over, what do you do with hundreds of hereditary mountain mercenaries whose only skills are assassination, arson, and deep cover espionage? Tokugawa Ieyasu kept his promise. He integrated these warriors into the security apparatus of Edo Castle, assigning them a brand new, terrifying official title, the Onmiban, the Garden Keepers, or more commonly known among the local citizens as Shinobi no Mono, the Castle Detectives. During this peaceful era, they stripped off their combat gear entirely. Their daily routine required them to blend in with the lowest, most invisible classes of Edo society. Some became humble gardeners, trimming the hedges of the shogun's palace. Others became low-ranking janitors, scrubbing the long wooden corridors. Many donned the tattered robes of street monks, wandering around the massive compounds assigned to the daimyo, the feudal lords. Their core directive was chillingly clear: spy on the lords, crush the murmurs of rebellion. To prevent the regional lords from plotting treason, the shogunate enforced the strict Sankin Futai system, forcing every lord to spend every other year living in Edo under the direct gaze of the shogun, essentially holding their families hostage. And these castle detectives were the invisible eyes watching their every move. If a lord secretly purchased a few extra war horses or recruited too many masterless samurai, ronin, a highly classified report would slide onto the desk of the shogun's high council by midnight. The lighting shifts to a moody, high-contrast monochrome style to reenact the suspenseful historical events of the 1651 Keion Uprising. To truly grasp how terrifying these Edo detectives were, let's pull open a real criminal file from the shogunate archives, the Keion Uprising of 1651. The third shogun had just died, leaving the massive empire to his vulnerable 10-year-old son, Tokugawa Ieyasu. Sensing weakness in the regime, thousands of disgruntled, unemployed ronin began plotting in the shadows. Among them was a legendary linesmaster and spear instructor named Marubashi Chuya, who ran a prominent martial arts academy in the heart of Edo. On the surface, it was a school for young samurai. In reality, it was the underground headquarters for a massive anti-government coup. Marubashi Chuya devised a truly apocalyptic terror plot. His men smuggled massive crates of gunpowder into Edo. They planned to set off simultaneous explosions across the city's water infrastructure and highly populated residential districts, creating a raging firestorm that would consume the capital. While the shogunate's military forces were chaotic and distracted by the flames, Chuya's elite cell would storm Edo Castle, execute the child shogun's regents, and force a complete overthrow of the government. The plan was tactically brilliant, but Chuya committed one fatal error. For months, one of his academy's low-ranking domestic servants had actually been an elite Onmiban detective. This spy didn't wear a sleek black mask. Historical records show he disguised himself as a timid, hard-working kitchen servant who spent his days carrying firewood and scrubbing pots. He quietly memorized every face that entered the compound and documented every hushed conversation. The breakthrough came when Marubashi Chuya suddenly fell critically ill with a violent bout of malaria. Delirious and burning up with a massive fever on his tatami mat, the fearsome rebel leader began muttering in his sleep. In his fractured state of consciousness, he slurred the words, "The gunpowder, Edo Castle, we burn it all." Sitting quietly in the corner, pouring a fresh cup of medicinal tea, the humble servant's eyes narrowed. He memorized the precise phrases, slipped out of the compound into the dead of night, and reported straight to the authorities. A few hours later, the thundering boots of the shogunate's elite guard shattered the night. The rebel headquarters was surrounded, and the entire leadership ring was arrested in their sleep. Their punishment was a public demonstration of the shogunate's absolute ruthlessness. Chuya and his entire family were marched to the Kozukahara execution grounds and publicly crucified. This was the cold reality of the Edo shinobi. No flashy martial arts duels, just absolute patience, master-level psychological infiltration, and the unyielding invisible hand of a totalitarian police state. Chapter 5. The Theater of Lies, the Inversion of the Black Uniform. Visual. The visual style abruptly shifts to an intensely vibrant, theatrical, and stylized aesthetic. We enter a traditional Japanese kabuki theater. To the rhythmic, dramatic cracks of wooden clappers, hyoshigi, a larger-than-life actor in extravagant makeup leaps across the stage. Behind him, several stagehands dressed entirely in black clothing with black cloth hoods move silently, shifting props around him. Now that we know the real history, a massive question probably has you scratching your head. If the real shinobi of history were just ordinary-looking samurai, detectives, and deep-cover moles wearing everyday clothes, where on earth did our modern obsession with the black outfit, magical ninja powers, and throwing stars actually come from? The answer is hilarious. The entire myth was invented out of thin air by medieval pop culture fans and theatrical directors in the middle of a peaceful era. During the long, prosperous centuries of the Tokugawa peace, the civilian population of Edo grew wealthy and bored. They demanded entertainment, which led to a massive golden age for kabuki theater and traditional puppet shows, bunraku. Playwrights looking to sell out shows began adapting the bloody histories of the Sengoku period for the stage. Naturally, the legendary stories of the Iga and Koka clans using specialized guerrilla tactics to fight off 40,000 soldiers during the Tensho Iga Wars became the ultimate blockbuster scripts.
But directors ran into a massive technical problem on stage. The entire point of a real spy is to look completely normal. If an actor dressed in regular clothes sneaked across the stage, how was the audience supposed to know if the character was invisible in the dark or just walking around normally? To solve this storytelling dilemma, a visionary director looked at the theater's background crew, known as kuroko, black children. In kabuki tradition, kuroko are the stagehands who run around during a live performance to hand actors props or adjust their costumes. To prevent them from distracting the audience, they wear head-to-toe black outfits with full face hoods. By absolute theatrical convention, whenever the audience sees a person in pure black, they are required to pretend that person is completely invisible. Then, a stroke of theatrical genius struck. Why not dress the stealth characters in the exact same kuroko uniform? The moment an actor stepped out onto the stage wearing the all-black stagehand outfit, the audience instantly understood the visual shorthand. Ah, this character is moving completely unseen in the shadows. Visual. A clever animation demonstrates a kuroko stagehand suddenly pulling a prop dagger and assassinating a main character on stage, shocking the audience. This theatrical trope is then shown being captured and heavily exaggerated in mass-produced woodblock prints distributed to the public. Over the next 2 centuries, this purely functional theater trick was weaponized and exaggerated by cheap novelists, folklore writers, and artists. In popular pulp fiction, these historical mountain warriors were suddenly granted supernatural abilities. They could summon giant warrior toads, transform into rats, or vanish in clouds of smoke. Almost every single iconic ninja trademark we know today is a modern, manufactured fabrication. The straight-bladed ninja sword never existed in history. It made its very first appearance in 1956 on a local tourism poster designed by the Iga region to draw in post-war travelers. A graphic designer literally made it up because it looked sleek. The shuriken, star-shaped throwing dart. In a real medieval battle, these things had a pathetic lethality rate. Real samurai used them merely as a temporary distraction to throw at an enemy's face while retreating. It became a primary lethal weapon in a 1957 Japanese period piece film through pure artistic exaggeration. Even the very word ninja was popularized in the mid-20th century because the original characters for shinobi were easier to market and pronounce for Western audiences, using their Chinese-derived oniomi pronunciation, ninja. History completed a beautifully ironic circle. The real shadow operatives of Japan spent their entire lives trying to remain completely invisible to stay alive, yet centuries later, artists put them in the most recognizable uniform on Earth and pushed them straight into the center of the global spotlight. Chapter 6. The Black Ships. The tragic extinction of the real shinobi. The tone plummets back into a gritty, realistic, and industrial aesthetic. The year is 1854. Massive, steam-powered, iron-hulled warships, the infamous black ships of U.S. Commodore Matthew Perry, slice through the waves of Yokohama Bay, billowing thick black coal smoke.
The deafening mechanical shriek of a steam whistle and the synchronized crushing thud of Western military boots marching on wooden decks. No matter how magical and invincible the theater made the ninja out to be, the unyielding gears of reality care nothing for folklore. In the year 1854, the skies above Edo were choked by the industrial smoke of Western expansion. Commodore Matthew Perry sailed an armada of high-powered American warships straight into Japan's waters, using gunboat diplomacy to demand an end to the nation's 2 centuries of isolation. Faced with massive iron structures, advanced firearms, and industrial weaponry, the feudal Tokugawa shogunate panicked.
In a desperate bid to assess the threat, the High Council turned to the final remaining generations of the hereditary Tokumo families living in the alleys of Edo. They deployed one of the last great castle detectives of the era, Sakamura Yasusuke. His mission was identical to the operations his ancestors conducted during the war-torn Sengoku era. Disguise yourself, infiltrate the enemy stronghold, and steal their military secrets. Yasusuke displayed flawless professional tradecraft. He stripped off his samurai status and disguised himself as a low-class Japanese laborer tasked with loading fresh vegetables and fresh water supplies onto the American flagships. Using his ancestral training in social engineering and psychological camouflage, he completely bypassed the suspicion of the American sentries and stepped onto the deck of the world's most advanced military technology. Moving silently through the ship, he used his peripheral vision to document the caliber of the American cannons, the watch schedules of the sailors, and even managed to swipe discarded papers from the American officers' quarters. But when he returned to a candlelit chamber inside Edo Castle to present his hard-earned intelligence to the shogunate's high officials, the room fell into a hollow, devastating silence. The papers he had risked his life to steal were nothing more than a standard U.S. Navy dinner menu and a few ordinary American newspapers. In the face of an industrial paradigm shift, Yasusuke and his ancestral arts faced a tragic truth. In the medieval era of swords and bows, knowing a lord's personality or mapping a hidden mountain path could win a war. But against industrial geopolitics, an agent's physical stealth cannot stop a high-explosive artillery shell, and ears pressed against wooden walls cannot decipher the engineering blueprints of a steam engine. When the storm of modernization blows, it sweeps away the relics of the old world without a second thought. Following the humiliation of the Black Ships, the lower-class samurai and regional lords revolted against the weakened shogunate. Within a decade, the Meiji Restoration exploded across Japan. Armed with modern European rifles and artillery, the imperial forces dismantled the 264-year-old Tokugawa regime. The newly crowned Meiji emperor demanded a thoroughly modernized, westernized nation. He established a professional national police force and military intelligence agency equipped with Western uniforms, telegraph networks, and modern forensic science.
The Onmiban and castle detectives who had spent centuries in the dark protecting the peace of Edo were stripped of their titles, their stipends, and their purpose overnight. The last remaining lineage of the Iga and Koka clans dissolved into the modern world. Many of these elite operatives spent their final years working as ordinary rickshaw pullers on the paved streets of Tokyo or as low-wage factory guards. The lethal shadow bloodlines of Japan had officially gone extinct under the bright glare of modern electric streetlights. Conclusion: the mortal dies, the myth endures, the final retention trap. Visual: the black and white photographs of the Meiji Restoration morph smoothly through a stylized cyberglitch filter, returning to the neon-drenched streets of modern Shibuya. The camera pans across endless shelves of anime figures, video game cases, and global movie posters. The background music swells with a masterful blend of traditional shakuhachi and heavy modern electronic beats. When you zoom out and look at this multi-century journey, the sheer irony of fate is breathtaking. The real Shinobi began as a desperate alliance of mountain clans fighting for survival. They bled in the fires of Nobunaga's purges, saved the life of the future shogun on a knife-edge mountain escape, transformed into the hidden secret police of a massive surveillance state, and finally faded into obscurity against the cold steel of modern machinery. They were tools of the state who lived in the pitch black. Their ultimate goal was to ensure their names were completely forgotten by history. Yet, in the wake of World War II, a broken Japan looked back into its mythologized past to rebuild its cultural pride. Storytellers dug up those old exaggerated kabuki scripts. They stripped away the dark, oppressive reality of the shogunate's secret police and re-engineered these historical operatives into the ultimate symbols of individual freedom and rebellion. The black-clad, shuriken-throwing, spell-casting ninja of global pop culture is a complete historical lie, but it is a lie that achieved absolute immortality. The real men of Iga and Koka died in the shadows, but their mythical alter egos will live forever, leaping across the screens of billions of fans worldwide.
The camera locks onto the host, delivering a passionate, direct-to-lens final address. Now that you know the hidden truth, I have one final question for everyone watching. If you were given a time machine and forced to live in ancient Japan, would you rather be a real-world castle detective, spending your days sweeping the floors of Edo Castle to overhear political secrets? Or would you rather be a Hollywood myth, throwing giant shuriken and casting fire spells in a completely fake black jumpsuit? Drop your answers in the comments below, and let's see how many of you value raw history over Hollywood magic. If you loved this deep dive and want to see more content that rips away the layers of pop culture to expose hard, gritty history, smash that like button and subscribe right now.
Your interactions are the literal fuel that pushes this channel through the YouTube algorithm to find more history nerds just like us. This is a lonely fantasy, uncovering the truth buried in the shadows. I'll see you in the next chapter.